Hi, I'm Sleep Disguise, and in this video I'm going to show you how you get your drum loop going from this to this. Okay, let's dive into the project. So I have here a very basic drum loop that I've created. Got a kick, it's got a clap, it's got a snare, it's got a little offbeat hi-hat and a shaker loop. I've created them all using MIDI because I just prefer to just drop in the sampler into MIDI. I think it gives you more control. You can move things about, you can pitch things up and down more easily. And all the samples I've used here have come from my sample pack Radiance. There's a link to that in the description if you like these samples and you want to recreate this. But of course you can use samples from Splice or PML or anything you like for this, for what I'm doing here today. So the reality is this sounds okay, but it's kind of boring. It's just a really flat 4 to the 4 beat, sounds a bit robotic. We're going to make this more interesting and jazz it up. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we do is we add some additional rhythmic elements. So additional rhythmic elements are going to give us like our little bits of rhythmic interest, okay? So I'm going to open up another MIDI channel here. To do this, I'm going to drop in a drum rack just in there. And I'm going to just pick a bunch of, let me see, I've got a bunch of samples here. Some nice percussive samples here in Radiance, which I'm just going to drop in. I know these samples well, they all work really nicely. So I'm going to use something from in here. Some nice stuff in here. Let's see. That's a nice one. In fact, what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to copy this across and drop this here so we can have a bit of a before and after. So let's loop this. Let's get a little loop going in here. I'm going to do this over 4 beats and just adjust the length of that. All right. So what have we got here? I like this kind of deep thing. This is nice. We've got to be careful with volume with something that low. And I'm going to immediately roll off the bottom end because I know it's going to be a bit too heavy otherwise. But all right, so let's see what we can do. So one of the things I want to do here is just add some other rhythmic grooves. And I can use something here called polyrhythms, which is when we basically layer one rhythmic time signature over another to create this kind of really interesting groovy tension. So if we add in here something like that, like that, like that, let's see. That's quite nice. It's quite subtle, but it's quite nice. So, and then maybe we had, what have we got here? This is a nice little, I like this little white noise thing. So let's try spacing these out. Yeah, see what we're doing here is we're spacing these. We're just filling up the space evenly. Like you could add all of these 6 in, but I think it's a bit much. So I'm going to take those 2 out at the start and the end and just create this. That's quite cool. And then I really want to watch the volume on this tom. So I might bring that right down. And then there's a little one. Yeah, like this. Sometimes a little at the end, quite cool. Right, immediately we've got a bit more interest, okay? And the other thing we can do here is maybe find some interesting loops to add some interest. So what have we got in here? Oh yeah, that's cool. I like this. I like this. Let's pop this in here. Right. And let's hear. It's a bit much on every single one, so I'm just going to cut it and just drag and drop that across. maybe take a bit off so it's got a, sounds a bit like it's a bit in the distance. Don't want it to be too prominent. Feels like it needs a bit more tail on it. So I'm just going to add a little bit of delay. Not much. Bit of ping pong as well to give it some width. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, so now you can see we're already getting some interest in there. Like, it's a really good idea to use this kind of percussion to fill up the drum sound space and just give more depth to your drums. Immediately more interesting. Okay, so ghost hits are where we're going to add in some quite low velocity, little hits here and there, just to kind of add some general interest into the track and add some more groove. So, this is quite a nice thing to do for the clap. You see that, how that immediately... Yeah. And we can do the same thing with a snare. Yeah, so the hi-hat, the hat's nice to do it as well, because you can get this kind of so. And again, it does help to follow a bit of a pattern. Like, don't overcomplicate it. One of the problems you can get into with drums is just making these like insanely complex drum patterns, which just, unless that's the kind of music you're making, for this kind of music, house music, it's on the dance floor. It's all about groove and movement. So you want these little subtle touches that are going to just get the dance floor moving. All right, so some nice little ghost notes in there. They're working really well. You can do little ghost kicks as well if you want. I don't think it's going to work in this particular track, but you can make that work as well. All right, so let's move on to the next bit, which is going to be swing. So swing is really important. Swing is basically, we're going to make the whole thing feel like a human being is actually playing these drums and not this kind of robotic beat that's come from a computer. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this shaker, because this shaker is boring and it is making the whole thing sound really robotic. So I'm going to adjust the velocity here, just down at this point here. I'm going to adjust this velocity, and let's see what that does. Hang on, let's solo it. Oh, can you hear it immediately? It's immediately got this kind of, I'm going to copy that across. It's got that like a human being would do. But, and this is even more important, I can use the groove pool and add some groove. So I'm going to open up the groove pool, which is just over here. I'm going to then go into the filters. And let me just see, where has it gone? Yeah, here we go. Logic Swing. And I know the one I want to get. It's down here. It's called Logic Swing 16th 53. I like this groove a lot. It just really works in the kind of music I make. So you can hear immediately. Now we're talking, really human sounding. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all of this, actually not the kick, so copy everything apart from the kick, and I'm going to add that same groove to everything. So you see now how the whole thing is starting to feel like a human being is playing it. And if we want to really get into the weeds and the details and really add that extra finishing touch, we can go into controls, and in the shaker, so this is on the shaker sample, go into controls, and you can see here, I can adjust these little parameters here. So I can put this up, I can put panning up, I can put the filter up, and we can start to get, it's going to start making tiny little adjustments to the way all these are played. So again, with the hi-hat, go into sample, into controls, add a little bit of these, add a little bit of pitch bend, add a bit of extra panning, add a bit of filter, and you won't really be able to hear it like audibly, but it will start to add up in the context of this whole track to make the whole thing feel more human. Immediately sounds way better. The other thing we can do here to add a little bit of depth is add in a top loop, which can help us get that kind of groove going. So let's, I sometimes do this just to kind of, that's quite a nice one. It's got quite a few bits in it. Let's see. I'm going to take a bit of low end off it. Do you hear how it's just adding some depth? It's like, it's not fully there. It's just kind of there in the background. I'm just EQing it slightly, taking a bit of low end and high end off just to kind of help it fit in with everything. But it's just added a bit more depth. And again, you can apply the groove to that. The final thing I want to do here is add on some processing to the whole lot. So I'm going to process all of these drum parts together, group them into a drum bus. Ooh. But I am not going to process the kick in with it. I don't like to process my kicks in my drum bus because I'm going to add some stuff to it that I don't want to add to the kick. But I'm going to show you how to put together a really good, quick drum bus processing chain using stock plugins only. All right. So the first thing I'm going to add in is a saturator. Fire a saturator on, group it, and then go down here to this little menu and start to create a chain. Okay. So you're going to create you want three chains here. Rename this one to dry. That's going to be our dry signal. First signal that I'm going to add effects to is the saturator. So let's solo that. And I want to add quite a lot to this. Take off what you add on. Okay, but 16 seems to be doing it. Add the soft clipper because that's always nice. So we're adding some nice raw kind of grittiness, some grittiness, can't say it, some grittiness there. And then we're going to add in some roar. And actually, I'm going to make this really easy by using a preset that comes with Ableton called Drum Kit Enhancer. This is just so simple. Add Drum Kit Enhancer on. And that's what it does. Just adds those of brightness. So now what we want to do, that we've put those in, we want to just dial them into taste, okay? We're going to mix them in with the dry signal. I don't want them to be too distorted. There we go. Oh yeah, do you hear how much better that is? Now, just to be sure that we're not just cranking up the volume and telling ourselves it sounds better, let's get a utility on it and we'll bring the volume down. So I'm going to group those together. And then I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to take this off. And we can see here that this is peaking around about 8.4, 8.5. If I add this on, it's peaking at about 5.5. So I need to take about 3 dB off there. 8.6. Great. Okay. So this is now not adding any volume. Yeah, it's just adding brightness and warmth. Fantastic. Okay. The next thing we can do here is, if we want, we can add, what I like to do then is, we can add a bit of drum bus if you want. This is nice just to add a little bit of extra. So you just add a bit of bit of drive, bit of crunch. I tend to put it on medium, add the compressor in, add some transients, and oh my God, it's way too much, but we're not going to add it 100% wet. We're just going to dial it in gently. Like 6% there. It's definitely adding quite a bit though, you can hear that. So let's do the same thing again with the utility. Let's get this off. 8.76, 7.12, 8.1, that'll do. So we've shaved another dB off. All right, then we're going to compress this bad boy. So let's get the glue compressor out, why can't I see that? There it is. Okay, there's a nice preset in here actually you can use called, let me see, Drum Gentle 2 Bus. And if we add that on, you can see it's all set up nicely for drum bus processing. Let's take off a few dB and let's add them back in again. Again, keep checking this to make sure that we're not losing or adding too much volume. Where were we before? It was 8.1, 8.3 here, 8.8, 8.2, perfect. That's lovely. So now we're going to add a limiter. So just grab the limiter from in here, pop it down. And what we want to do is just try to get these peaks under control. We don't want to have huge peaks going into our master bus because that'll affect the headroom we can get in our master. So if we look here, I'm going to start just bringing this down just so it's starting to tickle that yellow line. You can see it. It's basically about -10. And then I'm going to just nudge this up, this gain up a little bit. Probably give us about 1.5 it looks like, and we're getting a nice little bit of clipping, just clipping the top of that off, just limiting the top of that off. And you can see here then that we're getting precisely -10 in the drum bus. That's the limiter doing its job. So we're actually now getting that right under control. And what's really interesting about that is if I group all of these together, what's actually now happening is we're actually technically we're going to make it quieter because this is now peaking at -8.4. We're actually going to take off a dB.5, but the whole thing sounds louder. And this is really good for getting a really loud mix. When things actually sound louder, but they've technically got less volume, this is when you're going to get a really loud mix, and it's going to really help that master along. So yeah, this is really great. You can do all of this with Ableton stock plugins, and it's a really nice way to finish off your drums. So that's how we can go from drums that sound like, if we switch all of it off, and go back to our original drum loop, drums that sound like that, to drums that sound ready to start producing your next track and to go straight into production. So I hope that's been really useful and it's the starting point for your next track. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you again next time. Thanks, bye.